Hello, all you skibbies. Hey, it's been a while, hasn't it? If you are coming here from the Peepshow Podcast, welcome. And after we take care of paying a few bills and a couple of other announcements, we will get you right to part 2 of the interview on SESTA and FOSTA. Yep, I am still here. It has been, of course, a very busy time. We've had several GRUs. I had a trip out to Montreal for the first and last Montreal GRU, and then went to the other end of Canada, sort of, to have the first and last Calgary GRU. And I just got back in a couple days ago, and boy, are my arms tired. And not to mention my jokes. Of course, this podcast is, as always, brought to you by LeeAllure.com. Lee Allure is a fantastic hypnotist specializing in erotic hypnosis. Also happens to have a nice little side gig doing making soaps and bath bombs and things like that. Spiral Eye Soap is her soap website, and LeeAllure.com is her hypnosis website. Has some free things and some things that are well worth the money she charges. And she does custom and personal hypnosis as well. I've actually gotten some help from her in trying to deal with a couple of different things, including memory, that has worked really well. So I definitely recommend her, and am very happy to have her as part of the podcast. And, of course, Twisted Monk, twistedmonk.com. Twisted Monk makes fantastic hemp rope. He is very concerned with doing it ethically and having a business that pays a living wage along with benefits to his workers. And let me tell you, he is doing it right, because I happen to know that as of this podcast, he is not even going to hear it because he is off on vacation. Now, a small business person who has been able to not only have treat their employees that well, and also is able to take their own vacation for a week when they can be unconnected from the off the grid, I'm so impressed. And I appreciate his support on the podcast as well. So please go to twistedmonk.com and let them know that you support the Ropecast. And if you use the code word Ropecast, you will also get a free little surprise in your order. In case you haven't heard, the reason I say first and last GRUs is because I have decided to retire from the traveling GRU business. The events themselves have worked great, and they're wonderful. They don't, however, support a career, and they were never intended to. It was originally designed to be a self-sustaining event just here in Madison, Wisconsin, the rope bondage capital of the world, and that's where we're going to keep it. So we do have a GRU coming up in August 3rd through 6th, or 3rd through 5th, and that will be at the Freya Project here in Madison, and you can find out more at gru.space. But right now, there's not going to be any GRUs anywhere else. So apologies to those of you in San Diego and LA and Chicago and Kansas City and Austin that were looking forward to the upcoming GRUs. But I'm afraid you're going to have to do it yourself. But I'm not going to leave you alone. Starting July 18th, I'm going to be offering a live online training class, a series of 4 for doing open space events for alternative communities. And you can find out more about that at openspace.coach. And if you are wanting a more non-live but still online thing, I am also working on creating a Udemy course that will be about how to do open space stuff. And hey, if you're doing one and you want to just consult with me, give me an email, gray@creativegray.me, and I would definitely love to see this happening. As a matter of fact, I've seen a few of them already happening. There's going to be a leather and cigar open space down in Baltimore, which, I wish I could make it to, coming up. And there's also going to be a leather unconference in Kansas City coming up in November. And I'm pretty excited to see that. That one I am going to go to because they hired me to do graphic recording there. Yay! Because that's what I'm kind of pivoting to. I'm doing more graphic recording and sketchnoting and things like that. If you are part of my Patreon, you are not surprised to hear this. And you'll get to see a lot more of that kind of stuff going on. But I'm still doing Ropecraft, of course. But I am pulling back from the multiple event producing and presenting and things like that. Not entirely. I'm still presenting and teaching and stuff like that. But it is not going to be my primary purpose in life. Simply because, well, a few reasons. And some of them you're going to totally understand because you all know the community is in disarray. It is an unfortunate byproduct of the larger cultural shift towards the Me Too movement and things like that. When, well, somebody once recently told me, you know what? It seems to me, you can guess what demographic this person belonged to. Seems to me that it's getting to the point where anybody who has ever played with anyone who isn't their wife or their girlfriend or their partner is going to be accused of some kind of sexual or consent violation. And I'm working on practicing listening more, so I just listened and nodded my head. And at the same time, I had this thought of saying, well, I think that part of the reason we're seeing this is because up until relatively recently, anyone who played with anyone who wasn't their direct partner was likely subject to some kind of consent violation. So is it a pendulum? Yeah, kind of. And it's unfortunate. And it's at the same time, I think a lot of necessary things are happening. I wish it was happening more smoothly. If you've listened to the podcast for any length of time, you know that I made my own particular efforts towards improving the consent culture in the community, which worked a lot until it didn't. And that's just part of the way it goes. So I'm hoping that things get better. But until they do, I'm definitely going to be one of those people who is pulling back and doing my best to support and initiatives and support events and support people who are working to make it better as opposed to trying to be in the front lines of it. So if you have someone that you think I should interview on the podcast about this kind of stuff, please let me know. And you get right now another shit show. And I say shit show because it's nothing to do with, well, I guess it does have kind of to do with consent, but in a larger sense, because as you all know, I've been a advocate of sex workers for quite a while. I've done sex work myself. And I got a chance to meet up way back during the Pittsburgh GRU with Jessie Sage and PJ Sage, who do the Peepshow Podcast. And they are advocates for Swap Pittsburgh. And they interviewed me, and we had a long discussion. This is back when the FOSTA-SESTA thing was only maybe a couple months old, and people were just starting to see how bad it was going to be. So I am not a politician, nor am I a lawyer, nor am I in law enforcement. So everything you're about to hear is not only possibly invalid, but you're also, if you're just listening to this one, you are listening to part 2. We put part 1 on the Peepshow Podcast, episode 16. You can go to peepshowpodcast.com and give that one a listen. And you'll hear another person, Maria Guza, and myself later on talking about it. And then this is part 2 of the entire podcast. If you're coming to this podcast from the Peepshow Podcast, welcome. I'm so glad to have you here. And we will, since you've had to listen to me blather about the rest of the stuff that if you're coming from Peepshow Podcast doesn't make any sense to you, I will just go right on to the recording.
So can you tell us what the fear is about FetLife? Because I'm not, I keep hearing like rumblings of that, and I actually don't know what's going on with FetLife.
So since he's hit the big time, I don't actually know John Baku as well as I used to. Full disclosure, though, there was a time that, we were talking on a fairly regular basis.
Is he the owner or who's
that? He's the one
okay.
who created it. Yeah, John Baku. And so I can tell you what I think will happen to FetLife, but it is entirely speculation.
Sure.
And it's speculation at the same time kind of going, well, I don't blame him for this. I personally think that one day we're going to wake up and FetLife is going to be gone.
Okay.
And this kind of relates to the same thing that happened with Craigslist Personals, there's a long list of other sites that I can't think of right now, but they were niche, the furry community sites and things like that, that they just said, you know what, they have nobody's actually come after me, but this makes me so vulnerable, I can't risk it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And FetLife is such a broad spectrum of things there. I mean, they've done things already, like cut anything on escorting is gone. Anything on financial domination, which is a legitimate kink,
right,
is
also
gone.
Legal.
And and legal, exactly.
Right.
But that's gone because they just can't risk it.
Yeah.
And the thing is, and this is where when I was reading the Backpage indictment, I was thinking was horrible, is that if you use some special word, like we decide that instead of saying FinDom, we're going to say shark suckers. I don't know, whatever. We're going to use that word instead. Well, I mean, the law is mean, but it's not stupid.
Right.
And so they will just say, well, when you say this, you mean this. When you say Lolita, you mean underage things. When you say shark sucker, we know you mean financial domination.
Yeah.
So, this site is of aiding and abetting. They literally charged Backpage with aiding and abetting prostitution based on code words.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
right.
to me, that says that they're not going to stop at the blatant things. And I don't see how John Baku can keep it open.
Right.
At risk to him. And I don't blame him for that. I mean, it's not his fault that the American legal system is idiotic.
Right.
So I personally am sort of bracing myself for when we wake up and FetLife is gone.
Yeah.
And I'm urging all of my friends who do a lot of their group organizing to find other ways to organize and contact people, because when it disappears, they don't have to give us any warning. Now, he has come out and said that he doesn't have any intention of doing that.
Yeah.
And that they're still examining the options and things like that, which I respect him a lot for not just cutting and running, because I would not blame him if he did that. But I'm not sure. The more sites we see get shut down, the more a lot of people bring up that it's a Canadian-held company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But, they could still just say, okay, if you have an IP address in America, you can't.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I know he's already had to deal with the problems with the payment processors.
Right.
That has already happened.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I would not count on it, and I don't think it's their fault.
Right.
A lot of people are like, well, he should stand his ground and fight. It's like, he's not even an American citizen. It's not his problem,
Yeah.
So that's what I know. And again,
Yeah.
I'm entirely speculating. Okay, so this is the other thing that's going to affect is moving hosting of our websites to offshore hosting companies, and getting domain names that are not .com or .net, because the U.S. government has jurisdiction over those kinds of things. So ropecraft.net is see the little plug there? I was real subtle there.
Yeah,
So
that was good.
www.ropecraft.net is our main site for the bondage thing, but we're going to be purchasing ropecraft.love.
Yeah.
Because love and .love and .me are both foreign-held domain names.
Okay.
Right.
So they're somewhat safer, and they're safer in terms of the U.S. government not being able to seize them. They are not safer in terms of being more secure.
Right.
It's the same way.
So with the protonmail.ch, like people are moving to that
exactly.
too.
I mean, Proton Mail itself is secure, but the reason that people are opting for protonmail.ch accounts as opposed to protonmail.com accounts is the same fear that since the U.S. government ultimately can exercise control over the .com, they need to use the Swiss domain name because there's more protections. And
they also recently opened up the .me, so you can get whatever your Proton Mail address is at pm.me.
Okay.
Yes.
So that that actually is kind of handy. The issue I've had with Proton Mail, we jumped to it last year for a time, and I still have the Proton Mail account, but there were two issues to it. One was that we ended up in the spam box. We ended up in every spam email when we would send to them, which got really problematic, like you say, when you're advertising.
Yeah.
So that was problematic. And then the other thing, which I found out the hard way, is that if you do have a pro account, when you expire, you're kind of locked in there.
Yes.
Because I let it lapse, thinking, I'll go back and get my mail, and they won't even let you in until you pay again. So and admittedly, that paying for service, I understand that. I just wasn't clear on that when I first got the account and first went to a paid version. So, but no, I think that Twitter being shut down by Cloudflare is a good indication that we really need to get out of the U.S. server. And I'm sad about that because I love DreamHost. Right. DreamHost has been very good to me, but they're U.S. based, and I'm not going to trust that.
Yeah, I think that's where we are, and I think that
I'm sad about all of this because you work hard to build up your profiles and all of your stuff, and
sex work is work.
Yeah. And a lot of our friends are saying that since they've been shadow banned and their sales has gone down, you can't, you don't have any presence anymore.
You would think this is all ultimately going to be counterproductive to the aims of this legislation, because I actually think what's going to happen is long-term people are just going to get more savvy to, like you said, using offshore domains, but also using the dark web and using I think that this is so draconian that it's going to push large markets outside of the reach of the U.S. authorities. And the thing is it's not going to just push traffickers off of these sites, but it's pushing much larger communities, pushing sex work more broadly, pushing kink communities, pushing these huge communities, which collectively are going to end up having to carve out spaces that are much harder for the U.S. authorities to regulate, which means that then when people who really are involved in trafficking and the really nefarious stuff that we can all agree shouldn't be happening, those people are going to be able to take refuge in whatever it is we figure out in order for our communities to survive and for us to do consensual stuff. They'll figure out how to just follow the same pattern of the trails we blaze to then go do the awful stuff they're doing, not because we accept them, not because we want them to be part of our communities, but just because in order for us to survive, we're going to have to do all the work of figuring out how to evade surveillance, and they're just going to copy that.
We have to avoid the persecution with none of the protections.
Yeah.
And it's just sad because if they would come to us and bring us to the table, we would be the first in line to work with them to root out that really
the actual trafficking,
awful stuff.
Yeah.
And that's the really
Well, it's the
sad
thing.
part.
Backpage totally worked with the authorities for things that look like trafficking.
Yep. Yeah, and the problem, and this is the lesson learned. If you read the indictment, it's very telling in that the government basically says, look at how they were trying to just abide by the letter of the law, and they're indicting them because they're saying they cut out the words that implied underage things, but since they were still kept the ads, therefore they were aiding and abetting it. They don't actually know that those ads were for underage things. They were using it to market because people go for the young, barely legal or something like that phrases. And it's scary to say. If you sit there and be like, well, I'm careful because I just I don't say sexual contact in my thing, even though it's a wink nudge thing. The government's just going to say, well, you didn't say sexual contact, but you knew about it, so therefore you're going to be liable for it.
Right.
There's no protection here. I think we need to have a worst case scenario, a pessimistic outlook.
Do you feel like GRU is in danger of not being able to
absolutely
continue? Yeah.
I absolutely feel like what I do, because I do for a living, is the kink education and sex education and this, either as a speaker or producing events. And I absolutely think that we are in danger of that. The more and the more I read and the deeper I look into these things and see the pattern of what's happening, the less optimistic I am.
Yeah.
Sorry to be a downer on the podcast. But yeah, I mean, and the thing is, I'm privileged in that I'm not retired, but since this is what I do for a living and I have a very low overhead as far as bills and stuff like that, and my kids are all grown and things like that, I have the privilege of being able to go down fighting, I guess.
Yeah.
I can actually go hang out till the bitter end, and make them shut me down.
Yeah.
And that's my plan.
Go down fighting.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, I don't think anybody else should feel like they have to do that. I'm lucky that I'm in that position. People with children, people with other jobs that they're concerned about, I would consider maybe withdrawing from these kinds of things, because you're in danger right now. And wait till things get better, which hopefully they will. Midterm elections are coming. And that might help. But right now, it's a pretty dark time.
Yeah.
I think it's also the positive side. And I will say what I have seen is there's been an unbelievable shift in like media coverage, for example. There was almost no coverage of the downsides of FOSTA-SESTA before the bill actually passed Congress. But in that time, there's been dozens of articles with journalists engaging and talking to sex workers about the immediate and damaging consequences of these bills. And I think that is really heartening. It's heartening to see that journalists are making these connections and developing these sources, and that we're seeing a different sort of tone in a lot of media where those stories are being taken seriously. So I think it's good that those narratives are out there. The other thing I'm seeing is a really profound uptick in organizing within the sex work community.
Yeah.
And there is coalition building and lobbying training and all of these sort of really, really big national efforts that the community itself, I think, has galvanized in a way that I just haven't seen in my experience. I mean, I can't speak to the 1980s or the 1990s or whatever. And I know that, for certain laws in California and stuff,
there has been organizing.
There has been state level organizing, but this kind of national organizing, at least in my experience, is really a new thing. And it does seem that there is some direction there. And it may be the case that because this bill was rushed through and so ill-considered, that there are, and at least I hear that we talked to Kate Diadama recently, who's been talking to
from Survivors Against SESTA.
Yeah, who's been talking to a lot of staffers for different Congress people and senators. And says, they are actually really receptive and they do want to hear this other side. And, there is some hope, I think, that if we can talk about the real consequences with people, that maybe some of these things can be reconsidered in future legislation.
My thought, though, is that it's going to get much worse before it gets better, though, because with this massive consciousness rising and with so much political campaigning, the first thing that's happening is everyone who's having those conversations are getting shut down, right. And I feel like there's a huge, I'm just thinking about the Twitter community right now, push for people who aren't shadow banned, for example, to try to amplify the voices of people who are, because most people are shut down. And so we're having a conversation, but the conversation is so internal to people who are already in it because you can't reach out beyond it.
Right, it's an echo chamber. The thing that scares me is that the ACLU is not on board.
Yeah.
ACLU put out one brief thing that said we are not in favor of SESTA and FOSTA. I think they tweeted it. Yeah. And that's it. They have not spoken up. And that feels kind of like, fuck you, ACLU. I give you money. What's going on here? So I think that if we get them on board, that will help. And I also think that it's going to take some person who overreaches, like I said, grinding at a club shut down for grinding, which will lead to a whole, people say, oh my God, it's Flashdance all over again,
No, that's a really
or something like that. It's going to take somebody who doesn't identify themselves as being threatened by the law to get threatened by the law, and it's going to be a high profile case for it to actually come out and change. And like you say, unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of people hurt in the meantime. Right. And I think killed. Yeah. We've already seen 13 missing people and 2 of them definitely are dead. So.
Right.
Yeah. I'm concerned, and I'm concerned. The Electronic Frontier Foundation certainly came out hard against FOSTA-SESTA, though probably for very different reasons than we're concerned.
Well, I'll say EFF, I'm sorry to interrupt, but this is Crypto Kink, one of the things we do with digital security. Sure. They've been very supportive of that. They believe in the sexual freedom as well.
Right. No, I buy that. It's just, I guess I suppose it's a more libertarian position, but it is very much freedom oriented. these are parsing small differences and probably not worth getting into, but we certainly appreciate their support. Still, I work, my history actually is pretty deeply connected to the tech community, and I'm actually kind of sad at how little attention FOSTA and SESTA has gotten within the sort of tech and social justice circles that I've historically been involved in. And it's been very difficult to sort of raise the alarm as much as I would like to, or I just it hasn't.
I think that's been true with the media in general. Like, I was surprised the day that the bill got passed into law or signed into law by Trump that I didn't hear it mentioned one time on NPR the whole day. And I mean, Paul Ryan announced he, kind of scooped that stuff, but still I was like, nobody cares about this.
And that's part of the problem is there's so much going on all the time. It's nobody's going to care about FOSTA and SESTA if Trump pardons Mueller, that kind of thing, which, pushes us to the back of the line again and again.
Right.
So, unfortunately. So be careful out there.
Yeah.
No, but it's existential for us, and it's, it always is going to be. It's weird, there was like people who are single issue voters on a lot of different things, and I woke up one day and kind of found myself in that same position. It's, for me, this is all of a sudden, this is existential. It's like a litmus test. I'm like, okay, all this other stuff is important, but where do you stand on FOSTA-SESTA? Like, and I have that, I have this mindset, but maybe that's good. I don't know. Maybe there's enough of us where that's going to start to get some traction, but I don't know. I don't feel like that's going to happen overnight. And I think you're right. I think the point you said is that about overreach is a really important one. That's probably the single biggest thing that could catalyze a reaction is if we see some sort of symbolic overreach case that ignite some broader attention to how poorly crafted this bill was.
So I would also like to just let you know that the whole experience of talking with Jessie and PJ was absolutely a delight. They were professional and friendly, and as you can tell from the interview, they were fun to talk to and very intelligent, and had a lot of great thoughts. I really appreciate them letting me come on their podcast and sharing their audience, and I hope you have enjoyed it and will check out their other shows. Again, you can always find out more about them at peepshowpodcast.com. Thanks a lot, Jessie and PJ. Again, I'd like to say thank you to leeallure.com for erotic hypnosis and twistedmonk.com, who makes fantastic hemp rope and bamboo rope with fantastic colors and a special color of the month every month, and you should definitely go and visit his site if you're looking for bondage rope or other fun supplies. Other than that, I will be hopefully seeing some of you at the Madison GRU. You can go to gru.space to find out more about that and register. Oh, and if you're in Madison, I've also got a figure modeling with a twist event. Some of you may remember a long time ago me talking about doing an event at Wicked Grounds in San Francisco called Wicked Lines, which I did with the lovely Mara, and it was basically just figure modeling, but with kinky subjects. And that's exactly what we're doing at Wicked Lines here at the Freya Project, and that will be on July 23rd. So hope to see you there. You can find out more at wickedlines.greatanswer.com. And you can always contact me at greatanswer@gmail.com here in the rope bondage capital of the world for good, saying, that's some good rope.